those parking spaces closest to the entrance of the store. You know, the ones with the blue lines and the blue and white icon of the man in a wheelchair, the little stick man in the wheelchair? Everybody still calls those handicapped spaces, don't they? Even though that's not the politically correct word to use, right? It's disabled, a disability. We don't say that person's handicapped anymore. But for some reason, the handicapped space thing has still stuck around. It's probably not going anywhere. It's a interesting word. How did it even come into use in the first place? It comes from an old English game called hand in cap. I'm not going to go into all of the details of the game. I'll post actually a link to the Wikipedia article for it below this. But needless to say, this was a game basically played with three people. Two people who wanted to exchange items, and a judge who, through a series of acts, sort of guessed at or determined what the relative value of each item was to try to make a fair trade. And this game rewarded monetarily a good judge. A judge who, when both of the other players looked at what was being offered, both players either agreed that it was a good deal or disagreed and said that it was a bad deal. One of my business mentors once told me, and it's proven to be true in my life, very sage advice. He said, "You'll know a good deal because both parties will be equally unsatisfied." Goes right back to this handicap game. If both parties were equally unsatisfied and said, nope, both parties said that's not a good deal, then the judge was also rewarded. It carried on, and the way that it went for the disabled meaning, it carried on, and the concept and how hand in cap became handicap was in the world of horse racing. Now, you may not be familiar with horse racing, but traditionally, a horse racing handicap, the arbitrator in this case, the judge in this case, being someone working at the track, basically in the betting portion of the track, being called the handicapper, which odds makers are still called today in sports betting. The handicapper would look at horses that were about to run, and his job was to try to make the race as close as possible, so that basically anybody could win. It would be a bad idea to have a betting situation where there was a horse who everybody knew it to be fast, everybody knew it to be the fastest horse on the track. Well, that horse is going to win, obviously, right? You want as close of a race as possible. And when you have a limited number of horses, what they basically figured out how to do is called handicapping. Now, what would happen is the fastest horses, the ones that had the strongest finishes in the past, would actually be weighted down with saddlebags with extra weight. And the amount of weight that they had would correspond to how fast they were. So the faster horses actually had to work harder. It gave the slower horses a chance to perhaps actually win the race. So that horse was carrying a faster horse carrying a heavier burden was said to be handicapped. So a disabled person, this is how it came into use, and it was only in the 20th century, a disabled person being seen to be carrying a heavier burden than an able-bodied person, thus the term handicap. We still see it used today. Golfers will have a handicap, which is basically, typical golf course takes 72 strokes would be par, that you hit the par on every single hole. You'd basically finish the whole course in 72 strokes. A great golfer plays with no handicap. He can hit 72. A golfer who's not so great he has a higher handicap relative to, relative to his skill. And that way he can play with another golfer who's really good. And instead of it just looking like he got blown out, you can look at the scores at the end. So basically, like, let's say I play with the 10-stroke handicap. That means that if my score at the end of a round of golf is 82, which would be 10 over par, and the guy that I'm playing against is 72 and he has no handicap, basically we tied. So it gives me a little extra advantage. It's different in that regard because when you look at the horses, obviously you have to slow down the faster horse because you can't speed up the slower horse. There's just no way. And those are the only two options, right? If you want the race to be relatively equal, you either have to slow down the faster or speed up the slower. Which brings me to the concept at hand. And it's a concept and word that is being thrown around, as always, whenever you deal with the state. It's being thrown around in these elections. And that's the concept of fairness, which is what handicapping in some ways is trying to get at. Trying to create a level of equality. And when I talk about equality, I always delineate and I make explicit that there is a difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. So, in the metaphor of the horse race, equality of opportunity would be your ability to enter into the race, right? The gates aren't locked. Nobody's stopping you from stepping up to the starting line. You're able to get into the race. Equality of outcome is how tight the race is at the end. But the interesting thing about it is, because you've slowed down the fastest horse, in this case, equality of outcome necessarily means that the race is run at a slower pace in terms of the winner, that the winner has a slower time than they would have were there no handicapping involved. And this is important. In fairness, in this fairness doctrine that's thrown around by those seeking to gain control of certain aspects of the state, or seeking to control the behavior of the state, to steer the state, as it were. Within that fairness doctrine, you've got fairness, and it always goes to this idea of privilege, right? Whether that's you're socioeconomically privileged, you're privileged by your gender, male privilege, you're privileged by your race, white privilege. It's funny that they never really, in this conversation, it's something that's always boggled my mind. And I think I recently heard, who was the comedian? I think it was Bill Burr who was talking about this. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The two real privileges that have always existed, there are two. The first one is intelligence, and the second one is physical beauty. Studies that have been done say, on average, people who are considered the most attractive tend to earn more than individuals, who, all other things being equal, their age, their socioeconomic background, their educational background, their gender, their race, all of these things, the more attractive they are, and for men this includes things like height, which is considered a trait of attractiveness, right? Just, talk to a 6'3" guy and a 5'3" guy, all things being equal on how easy it is to get a date. All things being equal. So more attractive people tend to earn more income and tend to report being happier. Now, this is not to say that there aren't beautiful broke people or beautiful people suffering from severe depression. It's also not predictive. It's not to say that if you're born beautiful that you're going to be happy and rich. But it's just to say that every study that's been done, and studies have been done on this, have said, look, on average, more attractive people make more money. Same thing goes for intelligence. And I mean, that's, I think that one's pretty obvious, that someone with a 70 IQ who would be, considered mentally handicapped is probably not going to make more money than someone with a 150 IQ, which is considered genius. It might happen. I mean, there are highly paid athletes, for instance, who have relatively low IQs but are particularly skilled, have a particular skill set that allows them to make a lot of money. I mean, these are the exception to the rule, though. And so when we talk about fairness, I wonder how that would look. Like, I wonder what a fairness doctrine to even out beauty or intelligence would look like. So, let's take beauty. What would that look like if you wanted to even out the advantages that, say, an incredibly beautiful woman would have over her not so beautiful, her little bit homely, say, sibling? Same racial makeup, same socioeconomic status that they're built into. They go to the same schools. I mean, this is almost a cliche in movies, right? The super attractive older sister and the homely younger sister, and the advantages that the older one has. Those things are real and they continue, and we understand that. But how, all things being equal and them having access to all the same things, right? So they basically have access to the same amount of money to get the same, to go to the same salon, the same makeup, go to the same gym, be able to buy the same clothes, going and hanging out in the same general group of people. How do you equalize that? How could you give them an equal outcome where they were both treated, the gap between their treatment was closed? I mean, because for every step that you made the homelier sister more beautiful, the more beautiful sister also has access to that, and she gets more beautiful. That gap stays. As a matter of fact, that gap might even widen, right? Because while a good makeup and hair job will make the homelier sister more attractive, it might make the beautiful sister more attractive by magnitudes. You understand what I'm saying? So the only way that you could close that gap would be to set it, maybe put them both in burqas, right? That would close the gap. Or you're going to have to make it so that only the homely sister can have access to makeup, and the more naturally beautiful sister can't. So in other words, you're going to have to handicap the beautiful one. Where it gets pernicious is when we start talking about intelligence. Beauty is one thing, and look, I think, and this is just me, I like looking at beautiful people. And I know other people like looking at beautiful people too. I happen to be on a TV show that its success, at least initially, is due to the fact that there are some beautiful men on this TV show. And you can see by the followers on social media, and I'm the least beautiful of them. You know what I mean? So I know how far it goes. I know exactly how far it goes. And I love looking at beautiful people. I know you probably like looking at beautiful people. So I think the world is a better place when beautiful people are not handicapped. I think, look, when I go to the gym and there's a lot of eye candy, it makes my day better. I'm sure it makes your day better too. We like going to places that stimulate our senses. And beautiful people stimulate our senses like nothing else. It's natural. But I think it's, in some ways, it's minor in terms of our quality of life. Maybe it's not. But where it gets pernicious is if we start talking about intelligence. So let's take those two sisters. And now let's say that they're both quite beautiful. But one is a genius. Let's say the other one is of average intelligence, but one is an absolute genius. How do they've been given an equality of opportunity. They're going to the same schools, same socioeconomic backgrounds, raised in the same house, same basic opportunities. But the genius gets accepted to Harvard. And the other one, only place she can get in is still an all right college, a local, the local state school. Their outcomes are going to be, provided they both stay in school and both get their degrees, their outcomes are going to be totally different. Should be, or at least the chances of them being different are significant. So the question becomes, how do we even those out? The other one, as it stands, the less intelligent one, couldn't get accepted into Harvard based on test scores, etc. The SAT score in particular being, at least to a great degree, a measure of intelligence. All things being equal. Again, this is all things being equal. What do we do? You can't increase her test score. She did the best that she could. The only thing that one could do would be to lower the admission standards of Harvard. Does that benefit anyone? Does it benefit the people who actually could make the standard? Because now the standard of the education has to be lowered. Does it benefit the people who otherwise got in? Because what if it's not lowered enough to the people who got in on the lower standards? Now, instead of really getting to have a great college experience at a state school, now they're struggling and maybe they flunk out. Now, instead of having a BA or a BS, now they're a Harvard dropout. So is a Harvard dropout better than a state school graduate? Question. That's the question. These are the questions that come up when you handicap. And the unfortunate thing is, see, it's not a horse race. Because when you handicap the most intelligent individuals, you're actually robbing society. See, in a horse race, the people who benefit from the handicapping is the audience and the handicapper. The audience benefits because it's a more exciting race. The handicapper benefits because the betting. More people will want to bet because there's a better chance of them winning. The more even the handicapper can make it. And that's what odds makers are doing. They're trying to get more people to bet. And they're trying to even out the odds for themselves, the house. And in this case, the state is the house. We are all running. But here's the thing. Those fastest individuals are living within the society. Those smartest and most talented are within the society. And they are the first ones to find and discover those wonderful things that then make everyone's life better. See, the only way that they win, the only way that they prove their intelligence is by showing what they've invented or discovered to the rest of the world, handing it down and handing it back. And when those individuals are handicapped in the pursuit of fairness, they are not able to reach that goal as fast. And most importantly, it's to the benefit of the state. Every politician who begs for you to vote for them because they're going to institute some policy that will make things more fair. When they use that word fair, it's to their advantage, because it justifies their existence, and it justifies the existence of bureaucrats and academics who are going to put those projects into place and who are going to take money, usually, and the vast majority of the money they're going to make is from the front runners, to implement it. And if things actually were fair, if they could ever get it to be fair, there would be no need for them anymore. What would they run again on the next time? What would be their platform the next time? They just put themselves out of business. So they can never truly handicap it to be fair. That would be stupid. They've got to handicap it, but it can never be enough. Or they've got to let another fast horse get ahead and then call on, oh, well, let's handicap them. Let's get the handicapper out of this. It's not a zero-sum game. If you're wondering why there's strife and why there is conflict between groups in our country and around the world right now, it's because it's being pit as a horse race. It's not a horse race. This is not a race. It's not one against each other. We're human beings. We're human beings. Look around you. Almost everything that makes your life better was invented or has been given to you, or the ability for it to be cheap enough for you to consume it is because of a faster horse. I think I'm a pretty fucking smart guy. But if I open up my cell phone, the fuck? I couldn't build that. Somebody can. A faster horse. Would I rather handicap him so no one can build a cell phone? Or would I rather let him run and I get the benefit of the phone? That's what we have to ask ourselves. The state is the handicapper. Would you rather have the benefits that come from a society that has some fast horses? Or would you rather that society stays as slowed down and disabled as it currently is?